Please welcome the president of Colorado Christian University, Dr. Donald Sweeting.
Betsy DeVos, her interest in education was sparked at an early age by her mother, a public school teacher. And her interest grew when she sent her own children to school and was confronted with the reality that not every child in America is granted an equal opportunity to receive a great education. She saw firsthand the work leaders in her hometown were doing to increase educational opportunities for students and choices for parents. And she's been involved in the fight to provide better education options across the nation ever since as an advocate for children and a voice for parents. For 15 years, DeVos served as an in-school mentor for at-risk children in the Grand Rapids public schools. She became a leader in the movement to empower students and worked for the creation of new educational choices for students in 25 states. But then on November 23, 2016, then President-elect Donald Trump announced that he would nominate Betsy DeVos to serve as the Secretary of Education. She served in that position from 2017 to 2021 as the U.S. Secretary of Education. Now, in my opinion, she was one of the best cabinet picks President Trump had and one of the best secretaries of education that we've ever had. And I want to tell you why. First of all, she was an advocate for a student-centric approach to education. Second, she was a great supporter for school choice and parental choice in education. Third, she wanted to hold schools accountable to higher standards to improve education for America's children. Fourth, she dared to suggest that money is not the main issue in the decline of educational quality. Then, she dared to challenge the unions and question their progressive orthodoxy. She was a great advocate in protecting the religious liberty of faith-based schools. She pushed for schools to reopen during the coronavirus pandemic. As a graduate of Calvin College, she also understands the importance of a Christian liberal arts education. And so we are so honored to have her here at the Western Conservative Summit. Would you please welcome the 11th Secretary of Education, Betsy DeVos.
Please welcome former United States Secretary of Education, the Honorable Betsy DeVos.
Well, good evening. Good evening, everyone, and thank you so much, Dr. Sweeting, for that very kind introduction. It's so great to be with you again, and it's great to be with a crowd of America-loving conservatives. What a terrific gathering, and what an important time to pause, discuss, and reflect on the things that matter most, and then go out and win the fights for our ideas. Now, it might just be this magnificent Colorado altitude, but everywhere I look, it feels like things in America are going up. Wait a minute, I see some confused looks. Did she say up? Seems like everything's been going downhill since Biden took office. Au contraire, my friends, au contraire. Lots of things are going up. The price of food, going up. The price of gas, going up. Inflation, going up. Illegal immigration, going up. Crime, going up. The number of males beating females in women's sports, going up. Not a day goes by without another report or indicator showing just how far and fast things are going up right now. And we know what that means. The likelihood of conservatives winning across America this fall is going way up. The failures of all the progressive policies that have taken root in Washington are on full display for all to see, and it isn't pretty. The Trump administration, in which I was proud to serve, has been gone from Washington only 16 months, just over a year, and look how quickly things have deteriorated. The importance of strong leadership and solid policies has never been clearer. And the absence of both, capable leadership and good policy, is on full display for the American people. They know what's happening. We can see it every day. And we're all paying the price, quite literally, every day. Perhaps no one has paid a higher price than our kids. The failures of the government-run, union-controlled education system have been laid bare the past 2 years. The consequences are devastating. Unthinkable learning loss, unprecedented mental health issues, time and opportunities lost that can never be recovered. America's parents see this. They see who is responsible. And when they go to say something about it, to advocate for their kids, they see the FBI called on them. Can you believe that? They've even, and I still can't believe this, they've even seen it suggested that the National Guard should be called in to help silence them. The National Guard. You couldn't make this up if you tried, and then there's this. It's inexcusable. But like you and me, America's parents have had enough. They've had enough of the excuses, the delays, the shoulder shrugs. Parents want better for their kids, and they want better now. It may seem like much of this is a new phenomenon, but this was, in fact, always the design. It's true. The father of America's government-run education system, Horace Mann, once wrote that parents should be viewed as having given their children as, and I quote, hostages to our cause, end quote. You heard that right, hostages. In Mann's day, at least the cause was mostly about education. Today, kids have been held hostage to radical leftist fever dreams, hostage to needless COVID school shutdowns and mask mandates, hostage to racial indoctrination programs designed to make them hate each other or themselves, hostage to history curricula that historians say is false. Think about that for a minute. Hostage to radical gender identity policies designed to defy laws of nature and of nature's God, that try to tell your sons and daughters they aren't actually sons or daughters, just the spawns of birthing people, whatever that means, or that they aren't even boys or girls, that they're they and them, not he or she. Hostage to bureaucrats in Washington who think they can and should control everything from on high. Hostage to failing schools, to unsafe schools, or schools that can't, don't, or won't meet kids' learning needs. The stark truth today is that America's students are held hostage to a system that assigns them to a school, teaches them what it wants, and does its best to keep what families want out of the conversation. Well, hear me clearly. It is time to set the hostages free. That's what my new book, Hostages No More, is about. It's about helping our kids, our families, and our teachers to be hostages to a broken one-size-fits-all system no more. The big school union bosses already got their hefty ransom, paid for by you and me in the form of so-called emergency COVID relief. A staggering $2 billion was sent by federal taxpayers to government schools across the country. That's 3 times the entire annual budget for the U.S. Department of Education. I say it's time for students and parents to get their fair share. And the good news is, it's happening. Education freedom is on the march across America. I was proud, along with so many others in Washington and across the states, to help spark the fire that's burning hotly and spreading quickly today. Education freedom policies are unlocking new learning opportunities for millions of students across America. It's common sense. It shouldn't matter what adjective, that's a describing word for anyone a little rusty on their parts of speech. It shouldn't matter what word comes before the word school. Public, private, charter, religious, micro, magnet, virtual. What should matter is the quality of the experience and the education fit for each student. Families should be in charge of education decisions. Education should not be the domain of government. It should be the domain of the family. And every family should have the opportunity to make the right choice for their children, regardless of where they live or how much money they make. School choice and education freedom work. It's what parents want, it's what students need, and it's up to us to deliver it to them. Let me leave you with one other thought. Pick a problem in this country you're upset about today, any problem. And I bet I can draw a straight line from that problem to its root cause in the failures of our government-run education system. Education is the lifeblood of everything we want America to be, of everything we want for the rising generation. And education freedom is an issue that conservatives should embrace and own, because it's about individual opportunity and freedom, and it's about preserving and strengthening all that makes our country great. I'd argue that if you fix education, you'd go a long way toward fixing America. It really is that simple. Thank you for letting me join you tonight. God bless you. I look forward to our conversation. Thanks. Thank you.
Well, thank you, Secretary DeVos. Thanks so much for being with us.
It's an honor.
Delighted
It's an
to
honor,
have you
Dr. Sweeney.
here. And I can't help but thinking the last time I saw you was in Washington, D.C. You were secretary, and Colorado Christian University's students were asked to lead the National March for Life, which is a huge event. And we brought 100 students, and we had a big gala at the Museum of the Bible, and you took your whole evening and gave it to us to spend time with the students and speak to them. I think we have a picture to put up on the screen. I believe so. There it is.
Oh, yeah. I remember that well. That was wonderful.
And Hugh Hewitt was the one who asked you questions, and just the students came away saying she spent the whole time and cared about us, and that sent a huge message. And by the way, congratulations on your book.
Thank you.
We have a copy here. Let's put a picture on the screen as well. The book, Hostage No More. I encourage you to get it. Chapters include Opportunity of a Lifetime, The Un-American Education System, The Real Debate Isn't Betsy DeVos. I love that. There's Nothing Civil About Civil Rights, The Education Freedom Agenda, The Great Parental Awakening. Sounds fascinating, so we all need as much help as we can get. Thank you very much.
Thanks. It's exciting to have it come out.
Well, in the last 2 weeks, the nation's been a bit shaken by the school shooting and the series of school shootings. A lot of people are thinking about that. It's in the news, and I was just curious what goes on in your mind about how to understand this and how to protect students when you see it happen.
Well, I, like everyone else, was horrified by what I saw and learned, and it brought me back to the Parkland episode when I was in office, and just the horror there. And my heart just breaks for the families involved and all of those on the periphery as well. And you know, there are so many emotions and so many thoughts that run through my mind, and as I'm sure others do. And it's really, I think, difficult to see a lot of politicians, a lot of leaders of our country try to boil it down to one simple thing or another and say that this is going to solve the problem. We know that this last 2 years has been very, very difficult for millions of children. And we should be more and more aware of the toll that it is, all of these shutdowns and all of the attendant consequences have taken on them. We know a lot of things about these individuals who go and perpetrate these horrible acts, and we need to be focusing more on how do we stop those individuals from actually acting out, and how do we keep those things from happening. I led at President Trump's request a school safety commission after the Parkland shooting occurred, and we compiled a very comprehensive resource for states and schools to really look at how they can best address these issues on their campuses, and understanding that it's not a one-size-fits-all approach. But I encourage anyone who is in a position to help shape policy in your schools or in your communities to reference that. There's a lot of really good and important resources.
I want to talk to you also about parental rights and education. Last year in the fall, there was a debate between Governor Terry McAuliffe in Virginia with Glenn Youngkin, and McAuliffe made the comment, "I don't think parents should be telling schools what they should teach." And there was a rippling effect that went out from that, a reaction, a kind of a parental revolt against that kind of thinking. You refer to it as a great parental awakening. What's going on? Where's that going?
Well, that was, I think, the most high-profile recent example. It was a turning point in that campaign. Glenn Youngkin was an underdog for that race in Virginia for governor, and at that moment, Terry McAuliffe had an opportunity to, bring that back and say, well, wait a minute, I didn't really mean that. But he doubled down on it and really laid his cards out, showing his true colors. And so it is, I think, a very good and current example of what we're facing. The system that exists to serve itself has continued to double down on all of the efforts to do just that. And all of the lengthy school shutdowns and lockdowns, they weren't based on science. They were really based on politics, and there's ample evidence to demonstrate just that. And so it really is an important time for parents to speak up, for concerned community members to speak up and to demand that parents actually get the opportunity to direct and control their kids' education. I like to use the metaphor of a backpack. Kids go to school every day with the stuff they need, generally in a backpack. And I think metaphorically, we should attach the dollars that are already spent on that child in that child's backpack for their parents, their families, to decide where they're going to buy their child's education. And this is an issue whose time has come, and the last 2 years have really laid that bare.
So you've been a great advocate for school choice, and we all appreciate that very much. So why are the unions so opposed to reform? Help us understand. You saw into that more than we'll ever get to see.
Well, very simply, it's a threat to their power, their control, and their ability to control resources. But this last 2 years, the system has been given $200 billion, as I mentioned in my remarks, $200 billion, 3 times the annual budget of the U.S. Department of Education. And so now is the time for policymakers to say, well, we're going to take the money for kids and make sure parents can direct and control. If they don't like the school their child is assigned to for whatever reason, they should be able to take it and use it in the venue or the customized education that's going to work for that child. The unions they continue to be the most formidable foe, and unfortunately, the other party, the Democrat Party, is totally complacent and bought and paid for by that control of the unions. And that has got to change, because education is not a partisan issue. It should not be a partisan issue. We should be about what is right for kids, what is right for them, not for a system, for a building, or any other institution.
So what I don't understand is why they don't look at the data that reading scores continue to plummet, math scores, and internationally our standings keep dropping, science
That's
scores.
right.
And you would think that parents would be outraged, and how do the unions keep their cartel, really, their iron grip on this whole thing when we're failing?
Well, their grip is they're starting to lose their grip because parents have awakened. And I think if there is a silver lining to the last 2 years and everything we had to navigate with COVID, it is that people and parents and people in general have really awakened to the failings of our K-12 one-size-fits-all, 175-year-old industrial model of education, and they know deep down that things have to fundamentally change. Now is the time to do it, and you know, it is just going to take people talking to their legislators, appealing to those who have the opportunity to change policy, to make policy, to do just that. And it starts in the states, but there's every opportunity also at the federal level to reorient policies around the student, which is exactly what I did while in office, was to do what was right for students to the greatest extent possible by law. But now is the time to make those changes, and we can't do it soon enough because, again, so many kids are hurting and so many kids have fallen months, if not years or more behind because of the last 2 years.
The comeback we often hear from the unions is that, well, we're not spending enough money. If only we'd put more money towards it, that would really solve the problem. And I heard you speak in Washington, I can't remember which event, but you mentioned that the department was founded with a vision of closing the achievement gap from the lowest to the highest, and 40 years later, $1 trillion later, it has not narrowed, and it's even widened. So
that's right. No, that is exactly right. Over $1 trillion spent specifically to narrow and close the achievement gap. It's widened almost by every single measure. And so how can you continue to justify spending more and more and more money doing the same thing and expect different results? As Albert Einstein said, it's the definition of insanity. We have to fundamentally change the equation and put families in charge of those resources. We spend, there are only 2 smaller countries than the US that spend more per child for education than America does. And so the issue is not the resources, the issue is how they're spent. And I believe in parents. I trust families to make the right decisions for their kids. And if we truly had an education marketplace where families were driving those decisions, first of all, we would have higher quality almost immediately, because the response would have to be to improve or lose students or go out of business ultimately. And secondly, we would have a lot more creativity in the kinds of education experiences that young people could have. You know, we were talking backstage about how my experience of education was. I was very much a hands-on learner. There are lots of kids that learn like I learn, yet that many of them don't have that opportunity. And so here we have our most valuable assets, our children, our future, and yet we insist on putting them basically into a one-size-fits-all approach and say this is how we're going to prepare them to be future leaders of our country. And it has failed miserably for way too many of them. But now is the time to change. Now's the opportunity, and I believe we can do it.
let's talk about universities for a little while. The Biden administration has talked about canceling student debts, and some on the far left are talking about free college. What are your thoughts?
Well, I think it's a travesty to be talking about that. And in fact, they just canceled a bunch of debt yesterday on, Corinthian college loans. But look, there's about $1.7 trillion now in student debt. And, the far left of the Democrat Party is calling for cancellation of up to $50,000 per student, loan. And the reality is that any cancellation of student debt is unfair. It is not fair to the 2 out of 3 Americans that never went to college or didn't take on any student debt. It's unfair to those college students who did take on debt and who have faithfully paid their loans, or to the families who save for their children to go to college and have paid the student debt that way. It is unfair, it is fundamentally unfair, and it won't solve the problem. So you cancel it today, you cancel an amount today, what are you going to do tomorrow? More students are going to go take out more debt. You have not fundamentally changed the equation or solved the problem. One of the problems is there is no governor on what higher ed institutions ultimately charge. They get the student loan money from the federal government, and there's no accountability on the part of higher ed institutions for what they actually provide students. So some of the things we did in office were to provide more tools for prospective students to make hopefully better decisions about where they went to school and what they were going to study. It's on the college scorecard. You can go and see what it's going to cost to attend an institution, and then importantly, what you're likely to earn after you graduate from a specific field of study. It's one way to help, hopefully, have students become better consumers in making those decisions. But the other end is we need to have a whole lot more creativity in the higher education world, where we were talking about the accreditors and what gatekeepers they are for higher ed institutions. They really are very insular. They want things done the same way and to protect the system as we know it, instead of allowing for new providers, instead of acknowledging that there are millions of jobs today that are going unfilled that do not require a 4-year degree, but do require something beyond high school. We need to be embracing those multiple pathways, certifications, credentials, all kinds of apprenticeship programs. And this was something that President Trump was really very strong on, was supporting the pursuit of multiple pathways beyond high school for a young person to pursue. And I think, I think this is a direction we have to continue to build upon, and one that I know that Colorado Christian has done a great job of providing value for the proposition of going to your institution. Other institutions need to be able to convince people that they actually have they're worth what they're charging for the programs that they have. An engineer is going to earn a whole lot more than someone who's graduating from a program that like a psychology degree. Well, you have to make those decisions based on good information going in, but you also have to understand and realize, taking on the student debt, what the obligation is. So bottom line, cancellation or forgiveness of student debt is not the solution to the problem. A lot more discerning students coming in and institutions really having some skin in the game somehow, really having to ensure that they're providing the value to those students that they're taking the funds from.
Secretary DeVos, you are a big advocate for faith-based schools. You are an advocate for all kinds of schools, public schools as well, and charter schools, but faith-based schools, and we deeply appreciated that, and calling for people to respect the unique mission of all these different schools. We're grateful for that. But during the last, 10 years, Christian schools have had more threats to them, whether we're going to take your accreditation away, we're going to take government money, or just lawsuits. I was talking to one Christian college president of a very big Christian college, and he made the comment that he signed up to be an educator and an education leader, but he spends half his time just defending the right of his school to exist. And he articulated what many of us have felt. It's been a unique season, but So the religious liberty and the freedom of our schools to do what we do has been challenged. And I'd love to get your perspective on where is this going as you see it? I mean, you got the Equality Act and the calls to take our accreditation away and all the rest. What's the future?
Well, I'm very concerned with this current administration. They have continued to try to turn back a lot of the good work that we did. As you well know, we had a lot of rulemaking around reaffirmation of religious freedom and religious mission for all education institutions. I'm very concerned about this administration in particular, and this is an area where I think individuals have to continue to raise their voices when they hear and see things that are happening that are contrary to the ability of a religious institution to operate freely within its mission. I think, again, this is an opportunity. We have elections, and elections have consequences. We have to debate the ideas. We have to then hold those we elect to office accountable. And when they are not held to account, we see the erosion in areas that are most important to all of us. And I think I do sense, though, a real awakening to these issues that we have not seen in a number of years. And I'm very hopeful that we will see the kind of wave necessary to roll some of these efforts back.
You have some of the trustees of Colorado Christian University here with us tonight. If you were giving advice to trustees, just personal advice about how to protect the school so that it can fulfill its mission, what would you say to them?
Well, I would encourage the trustees to continue to stand up for the mission, and where you feel threatened, there are good advocacy organizations that have continued to help make the case, and unfortunately, many of them also often become lawsuits. And if that is the case, I encourage you to follow that path, because the integrity and the mission of your institution is worth protecting. And I would say that for any school that has a unique and very well articulated mission, be it faith-based or other, and we just have to continue to fight against these forces on the left that continue to try to take the opportunity away.
I know you have a Dutch Reformed background, and I've learned so much from Abraham Kuyper, who was Prime Minister but also a Christian pastor, university president. And when he was Prime Minister, I believe, they worked out a situation where the government would fund secular schools as well as Catholic schools as well as Reform schools. Yeah. There was some kind of path forward where there was a true equality. Do you think that's possible in the United States?
Well, I would not encourage us to fund schools. I encourage us to fund students.
Fund students, that's right.
Yes.
Yeah.
And when you fund students and their families make those decisions, that is not funding any religious institution. That is supporting families, and that is supporting our country's future, frankly. And that is bottom line what we need to do. The money needs to follow each child, and every family needs to be empowered to make that decision. Today there are families of wealth and families of means and families that make these decisions. There are always going to be those families able to do that. We need to ensure that every single family has that opportunity. We spend $750 billion a year on K-12 education. I guarantee you there's enough money for families to be able to make those decisions, and that money to support their child's education.
Looking back at your time in office, when you reflect on that, what do you feel is your biggest accomplishment?
Well, I think probably the biggest accomplishment, and I hope the longest lasting accomplishment, is the rulemaking we did on Title IX to clarify how institutions, education institutions, need to handle matters of sexual misconduct. And it was a tough issue, it was a difficult issue, but it was an important one, and I'm very, very proud of the work we did on that angle.
And what's one thing you wish you could have done that you just weren't able to accomplish?
Well, I wish that we would have gotten the Education Freedom Scholarship Initiative passed. And I also wish that we had been able to get further along on our articulation through rules around protecting women's sports and women's educational opportunities in a way that acknowledges that women are, females are women and biological females are women. And
thank you for that clarification. There's a lot of people asking that question, and I'm glad you gave us an answer.
Yeah, I mean, it's hard to say that you're really supportive of the goal of Title IX. One of the aspects of which was to ensure that women had equal access to sports, and then say that biological males can also compete as females. The two don't work together. They're kind of mutually exclusive.
Last question. Looking back, what's one moment that you'll never forget as Education Secretary?
Oh, there are so many moments. I would say probably when I was voted, when the vote to confirm me happened, because I was sitting in the back of a Suburban watching on my phone the C-SPAN feed with my oldest granddaughter who's going, "Grandma, why does it say DeVos on there?" And that was a very memorable moment. But there were so many memorable moments, and I just was so privileged to be able to serve America's students in this way, and I had an awesome team that I worked with to do it, and I'm continuing the fight and wanting to make sure that children are hostages no more to a system that's not working for too many of them.
So the book again, Hostage No More. Get it, read it. Secretary DeVos, thank you for serving our country.
Thank you.
Thank you for being here at the Western
Pleasure.
Conservative Summit. Be an advocate.
It's an honor.
We appreciate you. Thank you.
Dr. Smith.